the current problems and how they occurred, I think, is important.
And
So
Put the mic up closer.
I'm going to talk about the current problems and how they occurred because I think that's important, and we talk about how to restore our lakes. So my name is Ken Campbell. I've been on the board since September of last year. Thank you.
So we have to keep it like this. Yeah.
All right, I've been on the board since September of last year. Thank you very much. And I was immediately given the assignment of lakes and beaches, and I got to tell you, they have a wonderful committee and they all work really, really hard. So I appreciate that, and I wanted to acknowledge that publicly. So I'm going to start by saying that our lakes are not healthy. They're unhealthy. And the reason I say that is because that's true about every man-made structure, a body of water. They're all born with a, I don't want to say a death sentence, but a life expectancy. You know, they're not going to last forever and ever. And this is not a result of neglect or abuse or anything that's been done. It's just they're old enough now. They need to be addressed. I don't know that they were neglected in the past. They just need to be addressed. So, of course, you can drive around and you can see that the lakes are filling in. Just drive through one of the coves or anything. But the bigger concern is the water quality. The water quality has really declined or is in a bad place right now. Why do our lakes fill in? Two main causes. Number one is erosion. You know, before this was any property was developed, the water would run down through trees, etc. If you see a developed lot and a tree lot next to it, you can see that, you know, the water meanders, and any natural waterway just meanders. There's rocks. The water bangs against it. It slows it down and it filters it out. Whereas here, that's not what's happening. Any place that's developed, it's not what happens. And the other cause is the lake design, and I'll get to that in a second. So again, erosion, every time it rains or there's runoff for any reason, it moves organic, like leaves and sticks and other things into the lake, but also if it has enough velocity, it moves inorganic materials such as rocks, right? So a couple weeks ago, we had the gentleman from the Jefferson County Stormwater Management Company told us that velocity is more important than the volume of water. It's been raining the same amount on balance for decades here. It's the velocity. You know, we tend to straighten out waterways, and we make trenches, and we do things like that that increases the velocity of the water, and that is what makes it that gives it the ability to wash things into the lake. There are, you know, if you go look at a farm pond somewhere, the waterways that run into it are grassy and rocky, and they sway like that. We build trenches and put culverts in that run the water straight into the lake, and it carries with it a lot of stuff, unfortunately. The other is the lake design, and I'm not a painter by any means, but that's why I brought this prop. I'm a visual learner, and you know, if you can imagine the water running into the shallow end or any part of the lake, and then it slows down as it gets into the lake. Can you still hear me? Am I doing this adequately?
I'm going to hold this for you.
It slows down as it gets into the lake, and then the water runs over the spillway. Well, it moves really slowly through here, and guess what happens? All the sediment drops to the bottom. You can tell that because when these lakes were built, Autumn Lake was 80 feet deep. We recently did a survey on the depth. We had a hard time finding places that were 60 feet deep. And if you look in the coves, you can tell that they're much shallower than they used to be. If you go to Summer Lake, nearly the half of it, the shallow half of it, you could practically wade across it. It's just so shallow. It's so shallow, and it's just filling in. Okay? And then there are other factors that lead to this. There's a term we learned, eutrophication. And eutrophication is basically just underwater composting. So as this organic material moves into the lake, it settles, and we have very, very clear water here. Anywhere that sunlight can penetrate to the floor of the lake, then it'll grow weeds, right? And algae, things like that. So what happens, it's a vicious, vicious cycle. The weeds grow. At the end of the season, they die. They lay down on top of that muck that's already there. That creates more muck, and now pretty soon the muck is deeper, further out from the shore, and so more sunlight's able to penetrate and create a bigger lake forest, if you will. And so it's a vicious, vicious cycle. That's a problem. The other thing that I would tell you, we dump a lot of chemicals into our lake, not purposefully, but every time you fertilize your yard with anything that contains nitrogen or phosphorus, when it rains, it's going to run down into the lakes, unfortunately, and that water becomes very nutrient rich. And so why do we have this problem if all these things occur naturally? If you take that very nutrient-rich water and it becomes very heavy and it settles down to the bottom, then there are bad algae and there's good algae. Bad algae outcompetes good algae, and it sucks up the oxygen and it sucks up those nutrients and thrives and thrives and thrives, and it outcompetes all of the good algae. And so we have basically dead zones in our lake. Our lakes, the best environment for fish and the desirable aquatic life is in the upper half of it. The lower half is just, it's not functional, and it won't last long term. And you know, what I understand is if you get enough of bad algae, then eventually your lakes can become toxic and nothing will grow in there. Plants, fish, crustaceans, etc.
Good.
I hope that made sense. I don't know if solution is the right term. Okay, some options. So quickly, in the interest of time, before I ran through a couple of things, and what I should have added was bad bacteria, bad algae. I called them bad algae, harmful algae. We have HAB, harmful algae blooms. The important part is they suck up oxygen. They utilize a lot of oxygen. Good algae produces oxygen, reoxygenates the water, okay? So that's important when we talk to this part. So talking about restoration of our lakes. So to get our depth back that we need, we could do dredging, and there's a couple of kinds of dredging. There's mechanical dredging, but that produces this substance that we have to let the water run out of and then dispose of. And there's a thing called biodredging that actually goes in and with enzymes and good algae, etc., it breaks the muck down and rediffuses it into the environment, the water environment. The other thing we can do is slow the water flow. So, you know, we're going to have, just like we had the lakes evaluated, we're going to have an engineering firm come and evaluate the water flow into our lakes through all the different creeks and different ways. But you can do some at your own home. Next time you plan on landscaping or anything, try to see if you can somehow slow or divert the flow of water from straight down your yard into the lake. And it doesn't matter if you live 4 houses or 5 houses up from the lake, the water's all gonna get to the lake anyway. So anytime you can slow the velocity of the lake, of the water, that will help. Eutrophication, that term that I just call it underwater composting. We are making a dent in eutrophication, but we're using chemicals to do it. We're pouring copper sulfate into our lakes. And yeah, the lakes look great as a result of the copper sulfate, but long term, I'm not sure that that's the healthiest thing to do for our lakes. And so if we could find a better way to do it, why not? So, and then lastly, just avoid using nitrogen and phosphorus rich fertilizers on your yard. So all those are great things that would help, but none of them address what I was talking about, that dead toxic water that lays in the bottom, that nutrient rich, minimally dissolved oxygen water. And so there are ways to do that. There are systems out there that circulate and percolate. They put oxygen into the water and turn the water over, like every lake turns over once or twice a year. And if I had, I love props, so if I could have brought one in. Does somebody here have an aquarium in their home, like a fish aquarium? What's that?
Want me to go get it?
And you had but you had a bubbler in there, right? You had a thing that bubbles water up through there constantly. Think of that in our lakes. We have systems that can put water in there. If you stop the bubbling thing, what happens to the fish? They die. They don't do as well. So there are ways to not only address the depth, but more importantly, make our lakes healthier again. And we're researching those right now.